right, so to wrap up our last area of motivation, we're going to talk about work. The big question is, why do we work? Do we only work for money? Do we work for other incentives? Do we work because we like what we do? Do we work because we feel like we have to? So work is kind of an interesting idea behind motivation. Well, because, in our society, work is central to both our identity, our esteem, our efficacy, all of those things that we've been talking about. The income from work can indirectly satisfy the drive for food and shelter. So work provides us the means to satisfy our kind of basic needs. And some are driven by something called achievement motivation. And this is an important term to understand. That we'll talk about and come back to throughout this section. And in rare cases, the goals and activities of work can feel like a calling, a fulfilling and socially useful activity. Some people seek the optimal work experience called flow. Okay, so again, flow is something that is showing up on the AP test more often, so make sure you're really understanding this concept. What is flow? Well, it's feeling purposefully engaged, deeply immersed and challenged. It's almost kind of like you're in the groove. People say, I'm in the groove, I'm in the zone. Athletes oftentimes call it the zone. Okay, so flow is kind of synonymous to that, but just when we're talking about work, we usually refer to it as the flow. So you feel purposeful, you're engaged, you're all encompassed, you're deeply immersed in this, but you're also challenged. So just a quote about flow by the person who kind of created it is that the best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, relaxing times. The best moments usually occur when a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. And again, you guys can probably take a look at your lives and seeing that when you look back at the times that you feel the most accomplished, you feel the most, satisfied about things, it's when you were challenged. It's not the easy times, it's the hard times that you overcame and that you succeeded. So the psychology of the workplace, another one, this is kind of one of those, what can I do with a degree in psychology? Well, more and more, something called industrial organization, or IO psychology, is gaining popularity in our workplaces, okay? And IO psychology encompasses three different areas: personnel, organizational, and human factor psychologists. So personnel psychologists are responsible for hiring and evaluating employees. Organizational psychology talks about management styles, supervision styles, leadership styles, and how to encourage teamwork. And then human factor psychology talks about how workers interface with machines in the environment. So they're the ones that go and say, okay, like this really, really complicated machine, no one will ever use it because this is way too complicated for the normal person to use. So how can we take it and make it much more simple so that people will actually use it? And again, as our technology is ever increasing, human factor psychology is also having to follow suit because, yes, these engineers can understand the dynamics of all of these things, but the common folk, like the rest of us, people like me who technology hates, I need a simple, I just want to push a button, or I just want to do this. I don't want to have to do these complicated steps. So personnel psychologists, what do they do? So all of these kind of things on the screen are potential areas of research and consultation for personnel psychologists. So, they do all kinds of things, like they do appraisals, like, evaluations of work. They recruit for certain types of people. They check references. They look at, all the data. They do all these different kind of things to select who would be an ideal candidate for whatever the job position that they are going to be, they're hiring for. When you're selecting and hiring and placing employees, they want to find the right person for the job. So they have to analyze the content of the job to be filled. They have to develop tools and procedures for assessing potential employees. They have to help optimize worker placement and promotion. And which employees will do the job well? They look at their strengths. Okay. They look and see, they'll do research to figure out which strengths predict job strengths. They develop procedures. So they'll go into a company, and instead of having to do every single hiring process, they'll come up with a procedure that the company can just apply when they're gone. And so how do you select the right applicants? Well, you might do the aptitude type things, which predictors of future job performance, things like past job performance, give them aptitude tests, right? Remember we talked about the RAT test, the creativity test for certain tech companies. But employers still rely on the informal interview to get a feel for the applicant, and that's important, okay? We've talked about that gut feeling, that intuition that oftentimes, we need to take into consideration as well. Now, there is something called the interviewer illusion or fallacy, and basically, interviewers overestimate their ability to read people because of 4 errors. 1, valuing intentions rather than habits. People can talk a good game. You can go into an interview and say you're great, but you have to look at past work performance to find out if they're really as great as they say they are. Neglecting to recall bad reads, such as the past interviewees who failed or quit, right? The interviewer might say, hey, I hire all these awesome people, but they forget about all the crazies that they hired as well. Okay, seeing the interview behavior as a predictor of job behavior. Again, when you go on a job interview, you put on your A game, or you should put on your A game. Is that really how you're going to behave in the workplace environment? Okay, and then using prejudgments to interpret interviewee behavior. And this is a big one, and this is why any of you that have ever been on a job interview have probably heard the first impressions matter, because interviewers fall victim to this idea that they're going to prejudge you based off of their initial looking at you. So it's really important for you to make sure that that you present yourself in the way that you want them to judge you. Okay, and again, the interviewer illusion fallacy, this is starting to sneak up a little bit more on the AP test. So really make sure that you're understanding kind of these 4 values and what the interviewer illusion fallacy kind of talks about. Now, what about organizational psychology? Well, organizational psychology is studying and consulting about how worker productivity and motivation is affected by different patterns of worker management, engagement, leadership, and teamwork. Okay, so the goals of organizational psychology are going to maximize motivation, satisfaction, and productivity, understand organizational structures and dynamics, facilitate organizational change, and improve teamwork and leadership. So they go into places, to companies, and they go in and they say, what can we do to make this better? What do we have to change? What kind of leadership styles leaders do we need to get in there to improve what's going on in our company? Now, grit, which is a type of a motivation to achieve and self-discipline to succeed. Okay, this is this style we call grit. Now, organizational psychologists work in part to maximize motivation and put it to use in employers. So grit refers to a combination of the desire for achievement and the ability to and willingness to persist at hard work. So when you're talking about grit, what you're saying is that you want them to not only want to achieve, but also have the ability and willingness to keep going and work hard. Okay, so it's kind of like, and the desire part is oftentimes hard, because if a person doesn't really care about their job, getting that desire can be a difficult task. So achievement motivation, or achievement in most fields of work seems like a function of talent, okay? However, kind of like Thomas Edison noted that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And when we talked about thinking and when we talked about, creativity, we talked about how, when you have an idea, it's not just having an idea, but it's also sticking with that idea and having the diligence and the motivation to keep going and actually make that idea into fruition. And talent can be a result of perseverance, right? According to the 10-year rule, it takes about 10 years of hard work to become a skilled expert in a field. So again, you might think you know it all, but until you get out there and you're doing it, you're not going to become an expert until this 10-year, which is kind of our general rule of thumb. And success in work is predicted more by self-discipline than it is by intelligence scores. And again, hopefully this makes sense to you after talking about intelligence, that intelligence can be a fairly abstract thing. But self-discipline, how diligent you are in whatever task you're undertaking, means a whole lot more than how smart you are. Now, satisfaction and engagement is also important, okay, because employees who are satisfied in an organization stay longer, and employees who are more engaged or connected, passionate, energetic get more work done, okay? A happy worker is a productive worker. So industrial organizational psychologists study factors related to employee satisfaction, such as whether a worker feels like they personally matter to the organization, and feels a sense of that the effort pays off on the quality of the work and in rewards such as salary and benefits. Okay, so, organizational psychologists really go in and be like, do the employees feel like they matter? Do they feel like they that everything is that they're getting something for all that they're giving. Now, Google has totally zeroed in on this, and all of the perks that Google gives to their employees increases satisfaction and engagement, and the people there work hard because they know that they have to work hard and they have to stay the long hours and they have to do the hard tasks, but they get all of those Google perks that come with it: free gym, free daycare, free lunches. They can borrow cars off the Google campus. I mean, like, they have access to like Google buses if they want to go on trips. So there's a lot of perks that come with that. And again, that is what an organizational psychologist would go in and say, hey, you need to do more of this for your employees. So an employee engagement comes on 3 levels. Okay, employees are engaged. Okay, some are not engaged, and some are actively disengaged. Okay, so these are kind of the 3 level of employee engagement. So what they try to do, what organizational psychologists try to do, is they try to go in and they try to move all of the employees up to where they are engaged. And these are some of the things that they do to try to help them with that. Now, human factor psychologists, take the design of the body and the functioning of the mind into account when designing products and processes. Okay, so for instance, these measuring cups, which are brilliant because, before you would have to like turn your head to the side to see the measuring cup. Here, you just have to look down because you're pouring liquids in, you just have to look down. Okay, so this is something that a human factor psychologist would work on. Oh no, what did I just do? Oh, that's the end. All right, yeah, so let's go back to this. So again, human factor psychologists go in and they would go in and they would say, how can we make things better? Basically, how can we make it more user-friendly and functioning? All right, that's it for this section.